Eli, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Any show that opens up with a little Alan Jackson is really, really good.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Eli, I wanted to get your perspective. I think I don't want it to be lost in the shuffle because Alabama opened fall camp this week.
Sure.
I want people to realize that one of the all-time greats that ever wore the crimson and white is being inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame tomorrow. And wanted to get your reaction when you heard that he was inducted. I'm sure you thought it was long overdue.
Very much so. It was long overdue, and forget subjectiveness, and the fact that I worked with Kenny for so many years. Just look at the numbers, his statistics, his performances, his Super Bowl victory, his credentials warranted him being in the Hall of Fame a long time ago. But as you know, Aaron, and you and I have talked about it, Kenny had told all of us on the broadcast crew, and I dare say many others as well, he had told us many times over that he was never going to get into the Hall of Fame as long as he had a breath left in his body. Excuse me. He said, I didn't treat the media well at all. He said it was an adversarial relationship. He said those men are never going to vote me in. He didn't say men and women. Most of the sports writers of those days were men. He said these men will never vote me in while I'm alive to enjoy it. And I never wanted to believe that, but who was I to doubt him? And obviously, as history has now shown, no sooner does Kenny pass away than the doors at Canton open wide for him to wander in. So that's the saddest thing here, is that this is all happening posthumously. It should never have been that way.
Yeah, and it's a shame, and shame on those people that let how you personally feel about someone interfere with your job, which is to recognize the great players. That's embarrassing if that was the case.
Well, and again, none of those voters ever came out and said that. That was Kenny's read on it.
Well, he turned out to be pretty right, didn't he?
It turned out to be accurate, but, we can't necessarily throw stones at any individual because they have never admitted that. But Kenny was spot on. I mean, we had talked about it for a decade. And he said, as soon as I die, I'm going in, I'm telling you. And indeed, that was the case.
Talking with Eli Gold, the voice of Alabama football that you've been listening to for years and years and years on your fall Saturdays. Eli, when you think of Ken and Kenny, what remembrances come to mind for you?
What immediately comes to mind is his love for the university and his love for his family and his love for other people who loved the university. I've said this time and again, and many of your listeners might have heard this, but, traveling with Snake or hanging around with Snake was like, wandering around with Paul McCartney or the biggest star that, whoever you perceive as the biggest star out there. He was always being asked for autographs, for pictures, and never, ever, ever, ever did he say no. Never did he ask for, $10 to sign an autograph or whatever it is that some of these athletes do now. It would just, what should have been a 5-minute walk to get out of an airport became a 20 to 25-minute saunter because Kenny was constantly stopping to oblige people. He loved that, though. That was what he was. People always said, what do you do for a living? Well, Kenny's job was being Ken Stabler, being the Snake. And he made sure he was accessible to the fans. And when he and I would go to golf tournaments, and I'm not a golfer, and Kenny was not good at all, but we would stand there at the 18th or whatever hole it was, and we would putt for everybody or whatever it was, and we weren't very good, but Snake would just love it. He would embrace everybody who's there. And he was a very proud dad and a very proud grandfather. The grandchildren, the grand snakes, as he calls them, He just took such pleasure in their accomplishments. So in many ways, Kenny's just like you and me. He was a regular guy who took pride in his family and pride in what he did, but obviously he was always under the scrutiny of many, many, many people who knew that name, and that name was immediately recognizable.
A regular guy, only with a Super Bowl ring. Talking to
exactly, yeah, exactly. Well said.
Talking to Eli Gold of the voice of Alabama football, you mentioned how comfortable he was in his own skin, and the fact that he never turned anyone away, was always there with a conversation or a picture or an autograph. What was it like going to dinner? I mean, because I'm sure you get that fair amount as well, being as recognizable as you are. How do you get through a dinner when you're sitting at a table with Eli Gold and Ken Stabler?
Well, the thing you've got to remember, Aaron, and I don't want this to sound, pompous or anything, but when people stop coming up to you, that's when you have a problem. Okay? If people are comfortable enough to come up to Kenny Stabler, to come up to myself, to come up to anybody in the public eye, just to say, hey, we appreciate your work, we'd love a picture, I hate to interrupt you, but, my dad is, he's your biggest fan and would love an autograph. That's an honor. That is nothing, at least that's how I look at it, and that's how Kenny looked at it. It's an honor when people come up to you and ask for a moment of your time because they're that comfortable. The other thing you've also got to remember, and I dare say you realize it, albeit for the most part on the print end of the world, with the exception of your show here, but those people, that's who we work for. We work for those people. You work for your readers and your 12 to 2 o'clock listeners. I work for the fans who follow Bama football and for whatever reason can't watch the television or just choose to listen to the radio. Without those people, we've got nothing. Without your readers, you've got nothing. And so Kenny just loved it. Were there times when you're shoveling some food into your mouth and somebody would come up and talk to you? I'm sure there are times I know there are times that happens, but they mean well, and it's the most sincere form of an honor when a fan comes up just to say hello, just to shake your hand, just to get a picture. So Kenny never took offense or was bothered by that. I know I'm not. I dare say yourself, it really is an honor, not a bother.
Talking to Eli Gold, the voice of Alabama football on the Crimson Tide's broadcasting network. Ken was so synonymous with so many different plays, whether it be the run in the mud against Auburn during his time at Alabama, or the Holy Roller, or the Ghost in the Post, or Sea of Hands. Mm-hmm. Did he ever, in your conversations, you guys spent so many hours together, did he ever have a favorite moment from football?
I think his favorite moment was probably winning that Super Bowl for John Madden. But he never really talked that much. It was funny. As great as he was, he never really bragged on himself. Other people would brag on him, if you know what I'm saying. He would introduce him. We'd say, he did this, he did that, and Snake, in his little self-deprecating self, he'd say, well, it's just another one of those football plays, or, whatever it is, or, he always laughed about his performances. Well, I've been underneath him over the years, after somebody sacked him or whatever. But no, he never really talked about individual plays or individual successes. I do know how proud he was. He wore that Super Bowl ring a good bit, and that was obviously a defining moment. But he really never bragged on himself, Aaron. If there was ever any, he didn't have to. Everybody knew the guy was great. No need to remind anybody. And if folks wanted to brag on him, well, that was fine. But you never really heard Snake tell many stories or accolades about it. The only stories he did tell were the funny ones, the breaking of the curfew, and how I did this or this guy did that. And he talked about Mark Van Eegen one day. He and Van Eegen were rooming on the road in some city, and it was kind of like one of those Escape from Alcatraz things. Remember when they built those dummies to try and fool the prison guards while the prisoners escaped? Well, Van Eegen had put some lamps under the blankets, and he and Snake went out one night after curfew. And the coach came in to do bed checks. And in many hotels, you hit that light switch right near the front door of the room, and that activates all the electric outlets in the room. And, Snake tells the story as only he could, and I'm leaving out many of the details, but how he turned on that light switch, the coach did, who came around doing the bed check, and both lamps in the bed lit up. And, obviously gave away the fact that they weren't there. So, he would tell some of those stories, but he never bragged on his accomplishments. When you're that good, you don't have to.
Wrapping up here with Eli Gold, the voice of Alabama football. Eli, obviously fall camp started yesterday. How soon out do you start preparing for an upcoming season?
Well, actually, you just caught me. I just came up out of my office. I've been doing a lot of notes on a lot of the new players, making sure I know who's who and what's what. It's ongoing preparation. It's not like all of a sudden you say, okay, time to go. You keep up with what's happening throughout the course of the season. But I'll get to practice next week and start going, more and more on a regular basis. Phil Savage and myself are lucky that we are able to stay in practice past that media viewing period. We do have access in that regard. So we'll start, showing up and talking to everybody and getting the scoop. And, of course, for me personally, our first Nick Saban show is on the 18th. So, that's almost here. I don't have until September the 3rd, to be ready for the first on air. We open up on the 18th with the first Nick Saban show. So it's going to be it's almost around the corner, but we all keep up with it on an ongoing basis. You just can't turn it on and be ready to go. But, I'm already working on my spotting charts, and obviously with the miracle of computers and Excel spreadsheets, there is no depth chart, so I kind of do my own guess right now until the coach releases something the Monday before the Southern Cal game. But, bit by bit we'll get ready, and there's a lot of stuff to do prior to the first broadcast. Commercial copy to be secured, commercials to be recorded, things of those nature that you don't have to do the rest of the year, but you have to do before the first game. I just finished recording promotional messages